Programming languages try to model many aspects of real-world logic. In an airplane, when a flight attendant tells you that you need to have your seatbelt fastened while the airplane is in takeoff, you understand immediately what that means. When the plane is taking off, you need to have your seatbelt fastened. The moment the plane reaches cruising altitude, you can take it off. In between that time, while the plane is in the act of taking off, your seatbelt needs to be buckled. In Swift, this kind of logic is represented by a while loop. Let's take a look. Much like the example we just spoke about, a while loop performs a set of statements until a condition becomes false. Let's take a look at the syntax first. We'll add a comment in here to separate the section, and we'll call this while loop. The syntax for a while statement looks like this. We start with the while keyword. Then we provide a condition and start the body of the loop. Inside the body, we write the code we want to execute. Let's look at a very simple example. We'll create a variable named x, and we'll assign it an initial value of 0. Then, using a while loop, I'll say print the value of x as long as x is less than 20. So we'll say while x less than or equal to 20, print x. If I let this run, you'll see that this loop just keeps going. And if I let it do this without stopping it, it's actually going to crash the program. It'll go on an infinite number of times. The reason this is happening is because a while loop will continue until a condition becomes false. Now here our condition is while x is less than or equal to 20. But as you can see, x is always 0. X doesn't change. So there's no way for a condition to become false. X is always going to be less than or equal to 20, so the condition is always going to be true. Inside the while loop, let's add a line of code so that at some point we hit our condition. We'll say x plus equal 1. Now here I'm using the unary plus operator to add 1 to x after every iteration of the loop. This way, x will eventually hit our condition and the while loop returns false. When this happens, the loop will stop. So if I uncomment this line of code, we should now get the correct result. In the results area, you can see how many times the loop was evaluated, 21 times in our case. The results area has some pretty neat features, by the way. And if you click on the I symbol by the second line, you can see the final result of x. You can also hit plus to embed that within the playground. You can hit the plus again to get rid of it. Even though this example is a bit trivial, we can use a while loop to write out a simple version of our for loop to iterate over the array of tasks. So again, we start with an index to keep track of the number of times we evaluate the loop. This is necessary so that we don't infinitely loop over. So right over here, we'll say var index equals 0. For the condition of the loop, we'll say that we want to keep going until index is 1 less than the number of items in the array. So we'll say while index less than todo.count. We can get the number of items in an array using count. And just as a reminder, since index values start at 0, the last element has an index value that is always count minus 1. So by saying go until the index is less than count, we won't ever have an index value that's equal to count and cause an index out of bounds error. Inside the body of the loop, we'll print out each task using the index and the array. But before we do that, I want to guarantee that I don't loop infinitely, so I'll write the code to increment index first. This is a good habit to get into. It's quite easy to forget that you may not be providing code to eventually lead to a false condition. In a Swift playground, that's fine because you can see the loop counter on the right. But in a real project, we wouldn't know and the app would crash. So in here, we'll say index plus equal 1. So with every iteration of the loop, we increment index by 1. Now in here, we can simply write out that print statement again, and we'll use index as the subscript to read from the array. And this works perfectly. As you can see in the results area, we have each item in the array again. Now, along with the while loop, there's a counterpart called repeat while. The syntax for a repeat while loop looks like this. We start with a repeat keyword, then the body of the loop where we add our statements, and finally a while keyword at the bottom along with the condition. There's a difference between the two. In a standard while loop, the condition that we provide is checked first, then the code in the body is executed. In a repeat while loop, the statements in the body are executed first, then the condition is evaluated. The difference is subtle, but with the repeat while loop, even if your condition evaluates to true at the beginning, you're ensured to get one pass through the body of the loop. Let's see what this is like in a playground. We're going to write two identical loops using the two variations so we can see the difference. We'll add a comment here. We'll say repeat while. Let's start with a variable counter with the value 1. So we'll say var counter equal 1. For the first loop, we'll say while counter is less than 1, print a statement. So again, we'll always increment the counter first. We'll say counter plus equal 1. This way it won't fail. And inside here, I'll simply print a string literal saying I'm inside the while loop. Now, if I let this run, you'll see that down here, it doesn't say I'm inside the while loop because counter is equal to 1, so it can't be less than 1. This condition is true already, so we never go into the body. So none of the contents of the while loop are evaluated. Let's do the same thing again with the repeat while loop. So now we start with the repeat keyword and then the body of the loop. In here, we'll do the same thing. We'll print a statement. We'll say I'm inside the repeat loop. And then we'll increment the counter again. Now, at the end of a repeat loop, you provide the while condition. So we'll say while counter is less than 1. If you look either in the results area or the console, the debug area, you'll see that our string literal is printed. It says I'm inside the repeat loop. It basically comes down to this. If you want to repeat a certain activity a number of times until some condition becomes false, then you use the while loop. If you have the same criteria, but you always want the body of the loop to be evaluated at least once, regardless of whether the condition is true or false, then you use the repeat while loop instead.
And that's it for loops. We're not done with control flow though. So as always, let's practice with a code challenge and we'll keep on learning.